Yes.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to Up in Your Business with Kerry McCoy, a production of flagandbanner.com. Through storytelling and conversational interviews, this weekly biography show and podcast offers listeners an insider's view into the commonalities of successful people and the ups and downs of risk-taking. Connect with Kerry through her candid, funny, informative, and always encouraging weekly blog. And now it's time for Kerry McCoy to get all up in your business.
Well, thank you, Gray. I appreciate that. I'm Tom Wood, not Kerry McCoy, although don't worry, everybody. She's here in the room. I'm usually one of those behind-the-scenes up in your business staff. But today, I get to interview Kerry McCoy on her own program. And trust me, that doesn't happen very often, so this is going to be fun. As Kerry always starts the show, 4 decades of running a small business called Arkansas Flag and Banner. Now, of course, flagandbanner.com. During that time, Kerry McCoy decided to create this platform. She wanted to pay forward her experiential knowledge in a conversational way. This is a very listenable program. Originally, she thought she'd be the one teaching others, but it didn't take very long, and she realized, whoa, I'm learning a lot doing this show. Listening to her guests, educational, inspiring, and after listening to hundreds of successful people share their stories, some reoccurring traits started to pop up. For example, most guests believe in a higher power. They have the heart of a teacher. They're creative, because as I've heard Kerry say many times, business is creative. And of course, they all work hard. So we're going to find out some of the inspirations behind those things as we talk to Kerry McCoy today on Up in Your Business. But before I get started and introduce her to everybody, I want to let you know that if you miss any part of today's show or you want to hear it again or maybe share it with some family or friends, there's a way, and Kerry's son Gray is going to tell you how.
All UIYB past and present interviews are available at Up in Your Business with Kerry McCoy's YouTube channel, Facebook page, the Arkansas Democrat Gazette's digital version, flagandbanner.com's website, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Just ask your smart speaker to play Up in Your Business with Kerry McCoy. And by subscribing to our YouTube channel or flagandbanner.com's email list, you will receive prior notification of that day's guest. Back to you, Tom.
Well, all of you regular Up in Your Business with Kerry McCoy listeners are in for a treat on today's show. I'm the editor of this show and podcast, and I get to hear every single word you say every single week. And I got to tell you, Kerry's flair with interviewing entrepreneurs and other people around the state, I think is really fed by your natural curiosity. As I have edited shows, I've found you to be equally fascinated by bait fish farming, rocket scientists, politicians, brain surgeons. Doesn't matter what it is, your natural curiosity comes to the top, and that's what makes a good interviewer. But this show is just a tiny little part of what keeps Kerry McCoy occupied every day. During the middle of the show, you always hear her son Gray talk about kind of the brief history of Kerry McCoy and Flag and Banner and all it's become after all these years. But we're going to dig deeper into all of that stuff today. So welcome to your own program.
Thank you, Tom. This is very strange and very relaxing to be on this side. Mm-hmm. It's much easier to be the interviewee than to be the interviewer. So I'm excited to get to talk to you. I know you don't even need to put any questions together because I'll probably talk your ears off. You won't even get to ask anything.
That's okay. I love an interview where you ask one question and 10 minutes later you ask another one.
Goes way down a dark...
Spirals way up.
Spirals way down into who knows where.
Tangent.
And since you're the editor on every one of my shows, I can say whatever I want because you can edit it out.
Man, I never thought of that, but
Does
you're right.
Frequently.
Yep.
Yeah, he takes out a lot of stuff. You should do a show with all of our bloopers and all of my missteps and all of my not so woke things.
Oh, God.
There's been a couple of times where I was just inspired to send little short blooper reels to Gray so that he could get a kick out of them.
Oh, yeah.
Did you ever do it?
Yeah. They're hilarious.
Oh, yeah, he's heard them for sure.
They're just for me, though.
Oh,
We thought
you
you
need
were-
to share them. Everybody loves bloopers.
We thought you might be too sensitive a flower to be able to...
Right.
That's
sure.
exactly right. That's what people. I've been called that before. A
yeah.
sensitive flower.
Well, let's start where you usually do. I want you to tell me a little bit about your parents, a little bit about your siblings, and where you were born, and the whole beginning of
You
Kerry.
know, I'm glad you asked that because I don't know if everybody knows this. My father is a Purple Heart recipient.
Oh.
Did you know that?
I didn't.
See? Yes, he was shot down in World War II. Actually, twice. Once he was shot down shot in the derriere, went to the medics, got the shrapnel taken out, and then flew again and was shot down again and was captured by the Germans and was in prison war camp in Australia for 2 years. Same number as Hogan's hero, Stalag.
17?
Yes!
Oh, my God.
Same one, but it was in Australia. And so there's some really good stories.
Australia or Austria?
Oh, I'm sorry, you're right. Austria.
it's
Why
okay.
do I do that? Okay,
It's fine.
Tom, edit that.
Yeah, right. Perfect. Thank you, Tom. Austria.
Austria.
Austria. And he did not, so here's the story of how he got shot down. So he leaves the base, I don't know what base it was, and he flies out on a mission, and there's like, I don't know, 20 of their B-52s going to go out bombers. He was a radio operator. He flies out, and all of a sudden, none of the people are behind him, and they're in a dogfight with a bunch of Germans.
Oh, my God.
And they get shot down, and they parachute out, and he thinks he's in the back, and he thinks he can't get out. Everybody's jumped, and he can't get out. So he somehow or another bangs out the back window and just jumps, but it's not a good place to jump because if you jump there, you can hit the propellers and get chopped up. So he says goodbye to my mother, says a little, "This is for you, Sally," he says, is what he says. He jumps out, he jumps out the window, he does land, and he gets captured by farmers, and they're marching him, or actually he gets captured by Germans, and they're marching across these farmers' land, and his pilot, and his, not pilot, well maybe his pilot, but the people on board with him, his crew members, are pitchforked to trees by the farmers.
Oh, my God.
So he's so glad he's captured by Germans.
Yeah, right.
Because he's walking
Soldiers.
past his friends, because the farmers are like dirty Americans, for some reason, the Germans, who were sympathetic to the Nazi cause. And so he gets captured, and when he finally does come home 2 years later, Mother doesn't know who he is. He's so thin. He's lost his teeth. He walks right up to her and says hi, and she doesn't even know who he is.
That's very horrifying.
So he's sitting at home 50 years later watching the History Channel because we now have cable TV and there's just millions of channels. And he loved the History Channel. He loved watching all that war stuff. He never knew where the rest of the guys were that were in his fleet with him and why there was just a couple of them out front and all the other ones were gone and a couple of airplanes out front. And so he's watching the History Channel and he hears the story of why. Is that not wonderful?
That's unbelievable.
So I show up at his house, and he goes, "Oh, my God, I just found out what happened." He said, when we left, we were the first planes to leave off the runway, and right before we left, we found out that the Germans had found out about our mission, and so they radioed a call back to everybody, and we were the first few out, were out of radio range back then and never got the message, and the rest of them turned around and aborted the mission, but they never got the message.
And they were sitting ducks.
Yep.
Oh, my God.
And then, so they come around, excuse me, they come around at the end. It's becoming the end of World War II, and they bring in, and they're liberating all the prison camps and everything. And the Red Cross comes and lets all the prisoners out and has donuts and coffee. And these guys have not eaten in 2 years.
Ooh.
Turnips. That's what he always told us.
Yeah, we couldn't have turnips in
he
my
only
house.
Yeah, he only ate turnips in the prison camp, which is why we could never eat them.
We never had turnips. I was 25 before I had a turnip. And so cabbage and turnips. Like, no cabbage, no turnip. So when they let them out, these guys overate.
Oh, yeah.
And you know what happens when you overeat? You die. Some of them died from overeating.
Yeah.
That's serious overeating.
They had coffee and donuts. Do you know how good donuts are, even if you're not starving?
Oh, yeah.
And then they just blow up in your stomach.
Yeah.
So they don't do that anymore.
Right. Yeah,
Red Cross is great, but
How hard was it for you to get him to tell you that story?
I was probably 45 years old before he ever told us those stories.
I could never get my dad to open up and tell me what he did during World War II.
Never.
Yeah. I finally did, but like you, it was decades after.
Yes.
Wow.
I know. So that's a showstopper, don't you
That's
think?
a show beginner, I'll tell you that. Wow. What about your mom? What about brothers and sisters?
So Mother, I love this about my mother. She always says, my mother was real fun, but she says, "Oh, we never slept with our guys till we married them." I said, "Mother, you only saw Dad 3 times and then you married him
Yeah.
and slept with him.
Right.
What a whore.
Your statistics, your statistical chances were like.
I was like, I think I went out with Grady a few more times than 3 times before I married him and slept with him. It's like, I was like, you can't really compare those things. But it was some wartime. So Mother goes to Washington. She was born in Batesville. My father was born in Pennsylvania. He's in Washington, because it's wartime. My mother's from Batesville. She goes to Washington to work as a secretary or something. And I'm not sure how they met, maybe a blind date or something. And, fell in love, spent the first night, staying up all night talking. And then he went off and did something. And then he came back a month later, and they spent another whole night staying up talking. And then he came back another time. And he was in Walla Walla, Washington. And she flew to Walla Walla, Washington. And married him with a cigar, what are those
Band?
With a cigar,
Cigar band
She
for
has
a ring.
Cigar band for a ring.
Oh, my God.
You can't make that
It's
stuff.
so World War II. I love it.
It's so
Yeah.
World War II.
I know, it really is. It's like a movie waiting to be written.
And, Dad says, we grew up in the Depression. You went to work when you were 10 to feed your family. I mean, you didn't go to work for money. You went to work to feed your family. I worked in the bakery. I was a little 10 or 12-year-old working in the bakery. And he said, we wore shabby clothes. We all slept in the same beds, He said, when we joined the service, we got a bed to ourselves. We got clean clothes. We got 3 meals a day. He said, I don't know how you ever make that great generation again, because joining the service back then was like a step up in your life, and Americans have it so nice now. Do I really want to go bunk up with a bunch of dudes when I have my own room and bathroom at the end of the hall?
Yeah.
I mean, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. And an interesting conversation with veterans is to whether they agree with mandatory service, like so many countries around the world have. You can't help but think that'd probably do us a lot of good if we had something like that.
When I was young, I was like, no, because I was young. But now that I'm old, I'm like, yes, because there's too many people that don't have a vision of what they want to do or how they want to do, and they're just kind of aimlessly trying to figure it out. And so when you get in a group like that and you have organized routines, you begin to find out what you're good at.
Right.
And joining the service, Israel has that. But that doesn't mean that you go into the war and you fight on the war. It just means you're service oriented.
Correct.
You go help at hurricanes. You go feed the hungry.
Wesley Clark talked about that, didn't he?
Yes, when we interviewed Wesley Clark, General Wesley Clark, he was very big on coming out of college and getting your college paid for. You come out of high school, you go into service.
And it could be anything,
teaching kids,
teaching
taking care of old people. It could
teaching
be anything.
English, yeah, right, doing relief work. Yeah.
But doing service work for 2 years.
And then going to college.
And then having the government pay for you.
Speaking of being prepared for life after, you get out of your adolescence, I've heard you many times say you wish that high schools would teach more life skills, like learning how to budget.
Pay your taxes.
Learning how to parent, learning how to pay your tax, and that they just don't do that. They don't spend time on those kind of life skills in high
No,
school.
my son-in-law didn't know you had to pay taxes. He's out there hanging siding after school when he was a kid, and he didn't have any really parental guidance, and so he's just never thinks about you have to pay your taxes, and then he's making minimum wage, and then 2 or 3 years later he gets a letter from the IRS that says you've got penalties and interest up to 20%, and he's like, what are you talking about?
Wow.
He didn't know.
Yeah, it wasn't taught to him. Nobody told him.
No.
You're a big proponent of VOTEC schools, too, as opposed to everybody thinking they have to go to college. Because
Yes.
you had a very positive VOTEC experience. Tell me about that.
Yes, I'm not good in school. I was not very good in school, and I always joke that I was probably voted the least likely to succeed. But I just want you to know that I went back to my 50-year reunion, and I got to make the speech at my 50-year reunion, and it was funny. I killed it. And the other funny thing about it, not to brag, but it's great. If it's on YouTube, you should go watch it if you're my age and you've had your 50-year reunion. You'll totally relate to all the funny things that were back then. Back then we rolled our hair, girls that are my age will remember this. We rolled our hair on orange juice cans. Do you remember that, Tom? Are
I
you
just
my
remember
age?
big curlers, but I don't remember orange juice
They were orange
cans.
juice cans. We cut the end out of both of them. And if you didn't have your hair in curlers on Saturday at the grocery store, You didn't have a date that night, so you put rollers in your hair and went to the grocery store anyway,
So that
so
everybody
everybody
thought
thought you had a date that night.
Wow.
Oh yeah, well that's the whole Coke can thing too, isn't it? It's like
Oh,
soda
what?
cans in your hair. It's like that's what I thought that was too.
Oh, we did orange juice cans.
Okay, yeah.
I guess
And
it depends on what kind of curl you want
Sure.
at
There
the
you
end of
go.
the process.
There you go. But there's a lot of, what are some of the other funny things, back then we had smoking holes. You could go and smoke at lunch in your, the boy-girl smoking hole. Can you imagine? Now they got Coke machines, though. I mean, which is worse?
I don't think there's anything to compare to the challenge of teaching kids back then compared to today when it comes to cell phones. I can't imagine what it's like to try to teach a classroom full of 14, 15, 16-year-olds when that cell phone's just burning a hole in their pocket or their purse.
I cannot stand to watch my darling granddaughter just live on her phone. She's going to have a hook in her neck or something.
Hey, it's the world we live in now.
Today she came down for breakfast. She spent the night with me last night. So today she came down for breakfast. I was taking her to school. She's 16. And I mean, I'm feeding her breakfast. She's been awake 5 minutes. She's just tearing that phone up. I said, does that phone ever not, are you ever not staring at your phone? She's like, shut up.
Yeah.
Afraid
Mama,
Grandma. What's the acronym for they're afraid they're going to miss out on something?
FOMO.
For a fear of missing out. Yeah, that's
FOMO.
it. Got to be connected all the
Well,
time.
I have that. I had that same thing.
Oh, yeah.
I had that bad in high school. I never spent a Friday or Saturday night at home until I was probably 35 and pregnant with you, Gray.
Yeah. I mean,
I
it's just a different level or a different
Different way to
arena.
get to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, Votex schools. You got to go to Votex schools. They're good.
Oh, and so many great living jobs are available after you've gone through a Votech school. You can learn anything.
I told every one of my children not to go to college, and they all went and got degrees.
Wow.
And so if you want your kids to not go to college, tell them to go, and they won't go. And if you want them to not go, am I saying this right?
No, tell them the opposite is what you're getting at.
Right.
That's
We're,
what I'm
we're
trying to
following
say.
it.
Yeah.
You are following me. But you could buy. I told all of them. I said, for your college education, we could get you some real estate, a house. You could parlay it into another house, parlay it into another house, and you, by the time you're 30 years old, you'd have your nice little nest egg. Or you can go to college, learn how to drink, learn how to do nothing, wear clothes or sloppy clothes,
Whoa.
and with holes in them, and not put on deodorant, and not cover your food in the microwave. And when you get home, I'll teach you how to. And then when you get out, you'll have 20 years worth of debt.
Sounds like she had a video camera on me from 71 to 75. That's exactly the way.
Am I right?
Tell me about the years that I hear you refer to a lot of times of waitressing and what kind of skills you learn when you waitress that you still use today.
If I could do any job, I would wait tables in Florida on the beach.
Wow.
It's just mindless and easy. Of course, I do hear
Mindless and easy.
Easy is not what I think of when I think of waitressing.
Waiting tables in a tourist
running
location.
a small business is hard.
Sure.
Oh, I'm not saying it's not hard, and the comparing of the two is not right, and not what I mean, but I think waitressing is hard work.
Shoot.
Not really, huh?
No. Walk over, what do you want? Okay, let me go tell the cook. He makes it. All right, I'll bring it back to you.
I
I mean,
have
how's
been,
that hard?
I've been asked a few times.
I would not tip you if you came up to my table and said, "Hey, what do you want?"
Well, you say nicer than that.
sure.
Of course, I say that because I waited tables forever, cocktail tables and food tables forever while I was starting Arkansas Flag and Banner. And so I say that, but I hear today customers are awful.
Oh yeah.
So it may not be the same today as it was when I did it.
The couple times that I was asked to be like a celebrity waiter to raise money for a cause, and there were all kinds of disc jockeys there for the night, you never ask anybody what they want that there's not some special order attached to it.
Yeah.
I want this, but can you leave this off and do this different?
Add to it.
Wow.
I won't even go out to eat with those people. I go out to eat with somebody and they do that because I'm an ex-waiter, waitress. I'm like, I'm not going out to eat with them again.
Yeah,
Well, it's and then it never comes out right. They're
Right.
like, oh, I told him to leave the mushrooms off. Oh, he didn't. Oh, I told him to change the cheese. Oh, he didn't. I'm like, get something else on the menu if you don't like that. Why are you being so weird? It's, you know what that is? Lack of control in your own life. So you got to go out and do something weird like that.
Wow.
Cool.
More nuggets like that in just a minute. We're going to take a quick break. Kerry McCoy is talking to us about her life and the way she, we haven't even gotten to the way she started Flag and Banner, but we will get to that here after we take a quick break. I'm Tom Wood, and this week on Up in Your Business with Kerry McCoy, we're actually talking to Kerry McCoy.
You're listening to Up in Your Business with Kerry McCoy, a production of flagandbanner.com. Over 40 years ago, with only $400, Kerry founded Arkansas Flag and Banner. During the last 4 decades, the business has grown and changed, along with Kerry's experience and leadership knowledge. In 1995, she embraced the internet and rebranded her company as simply flagandbanner.com. In 2004, she became an early blogger. Since then, she has founded the nonprofit Friends of Dreamland Ballroom, began publishing her magazine, Brave, and in 2016 branched out into this very radio show, YouTube channel, and podcast. In 2020, Kerry McCoy Enterprises acquired OurCornerMarket.com, an online company specializing in American-made plaques, signage, and memorials for over 20 years, and more recently opened a satellite office in Miami, Florida. Telling American-made stories, selling American-made flags. TheFlagandBanner.com. Back to you, Tom.
You're listening to Up in Your Business with Kerry McCoy, and I am Tom Wood, usually the editor of the show and the podcast, but I'm guest hosting the show this week because our guest is Kerry herself.
Woohoo!
It's fantastic. I'm telling you, her son Gray is with us as well, as he always is. Let me ask you about something that you're going to hear the word and you're going to think, oh, what is he asking me on this program? But it's interesting to find out people who work so hard and take care of themselves so well. Tell me about your body clock.
You are so right on. That is a weird question.
Are you a late night person?
No.
Are you an early morning person?
Yes.
Tell me what a day
I've
is
been up
like
since
for
4.
Well, that's exactly what I kind of thought.
Now, when I was young, I stayed up all night, did a lot of drugs, slept late, worked hard, did more drugs to work hard.
It was the 90s.
It was the 90s. I probably shouldn't say all that, but
Work
the
hard,
90s.
play hard.
Yeah.
When I was young, I stayed up late. I didn't get married seriously to my husband Grady till I was 32. I did marry once when I was 24, almost 25, but it wasn't a real marriage. Back then, if you got pregnant, you had to get married. My dad came over when I was about 7 or 8 months pregnant. My Purple Heart World War II dad came over and said to my future husband, who is the son of a doctor who he just loved, his parents, and said, RT, that's it, he's Ron Thompson's his name. I said, RT, am I going to have to bring a shotgun over here to get you to marry? Get you to marry my daughter? He was kidding him, kind of, but not really.
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
And he was like, okay. So also back then, you'll think people that don't know how far we've come, we have come so far in women's lives. Back then, you could not get married without a blood test. Did you have to get a blood test,
I
Tom?
did have to get a blood test.
You don't have to do that anymore. But back then, you had to get a blood test to get married because of syphilis, I believe. They were trying to stop syphilis.
I got married in 1976, and I really don't know why we had to, but we had to.
It had
Did not
something
know
to
this was a
do.
thing.
Yeah, it had something to do with disease control.
Uh-huh.
But also, if you got a drug test and you had drugs in your system, they wouldn't let you get married.
Mm-hmm.
So every time my husband and I, or my husband-to-be and I, went down to get a drug test, he had drugs in his system because he was a waiter at Buster's Restaurant. And he was and like you said, it was the 1979.
Yeah, sure,
I mean,
yeah.
that's when she was born.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it was the 70s and 80s. So we never could every time. And so then we'd have to wait 2 weeks. And then I'd say, okay, now you got to be straight for 2 weeks. We're going to go down and get a blood test. And then we'd go down and we'd get one. He'd never pass it. So, I mean, here I am, 7 months pregnant. He can't pass the blood test. My dad's like, you can't have a bastard. I mean, you didn't do that back then. Or we also did not have, what is that where you can tell the babies, what is it?
Oh, like DNA tests?
Gender test?
No, you know where they scan your stomach and tell you what the
Ultrasound?
They didn't have ultrasounds back then. That's hard to believe, too. Medicine has come so far.
Oh, yeah.
They didn't have ultrasounds back then. And so you don't know what sex you're having, so everybody paints their baby room yellow or green,
Right.
light yellow
Yeah,
or light
yeah.
green, because you don't know. And so, Dad's like, well, we're not going to have one of those kids. And I'm like, okay, whatever. And
Well, when did your lifestyle change so that now in 2022 you're getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning, you're working out 5 days a week? I mean, you're going to work.
So before I tell you that, I got to tell you how I ended up getting married.
Okay.
He has passed his drug test. We have 2 weeks to use it. There's a window of opportunity there. And, as you can imagine, I'm depressed. I'm married to a drug addict. Depressed. so I'm not doing anything. And my girlfriend, who lives down the street, God love her, she calls me up. She says, you have got to get married in the next 2 weeks. And there is a preacher sitting here in my retail store who just came by to visit with me. He's a friend of mine. And if you come up here, he'll marry you and sign the wedding certificate.
Wow.
So her retail store is a bridal shop. She sells recycled bridal clothes. So I run up there in a bright orange, pregnant muumuu dress. My husband's in his waiter uniform. He's about to go to work. We run up there. Her preacher man says, yes, I have the power to marry you. He doesn't have his Bible with him, so he writes down a few notes on it that I still have that I gave to my daughter. It was a girl. And so he writes a few notes down, and we stand together around all of her bridal gowns in her store, and there's customers walking around out in the front of the lobby going, I think somebody's getting married back there. No. So,
I did not know this story.
He did not. And he goes, and then it was like, do you say I do? And I say I do. And he said, okay, all right. And then I kissed him, and he left and went to work, and I went home. And
the guy signed your certificate.
The guy signed my wedding, and I got
certificate.
married. Yeah.
All
So
the customers are saying, this is the greatest bridal shop I've ever been to.
They must be so inspired.
Wow.
Yeah, I
Well,
know.
that's quite a story.
I know. So what was the other question?
When did this lifestyle of yours that was so crazy change?
Well, when I was pregnant with my daughter. I mean, I was partying with I was waiting tables as a cocktail waitress, starting my business, dating. It was the late 70s, I didn't know the ramifications of everything that you do. You're young. I'm
Sure.
22 years old. I don't know what's going on. We're just partying and having a good time. And then you get pregnant, and then you find out, oh, yeah, you don't marry drug addicts. And then you find out, oh, yeah, having babies is really hard. And then I am so lucky to have had the great parents that I have, because they just supported me and helped me. And there was no internet back then, so I had no idea how to raise a child. I was the youngest of 3. I mean, I think my daughter ate hamburger meat in the first 6 weeks. I didn't know that you don't feed babies food. I was like, why does she cry all the time? And Mother's like, maybe she's hungry. Make her a meatloaf. And I'm like, oh, wait, let's make a meatloaf. I mean, I had no idea. And the major book back then is Dr. Spock.
Right.
And he turned out to be a quack.
Gotcha.
And his kids say he was the worst father ever, and he was the Bible of baby books. I had that book, and I'd read it, and they were like, don't pick your baby up. Let your baby cry. Don't sleep with your baby. Just all these bizarre things, I mean, I ended up having 4 kids, so I got to practice a lot, and I got a lot better at it. But God love you, Megan, for having to live with your crazy mother. I learned on her. You know what we call her?
I think I've heard this before. What is it?
The burnt pancake. You know, you throw the first one out.
Right.
She was like, she hates it when we say that. So I just had to say it on the radio, Megan, because you hate it so much. And actually, I will tell you this: she is absolutely my best friend. We talk all the time, every day.
She works at the flag shop.
Oh yeah. I see her all the time.
Oh my gosh.
I know she's forgiven me for a lot of practicing on her. I practiced on her.
Until you dredged up all this horror again for her on the radio, and now it's like, oh my God, we're back. Well, let's go from all of that craziness. How in the world you turned out this good, I have no idea.
Parenting. My parents were great.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
I mean, after all those routing of your crazy life, then you end up finally becoming a business person in downtown Little Rock, but you were in North Little Rock for a while. You were working out of your car selling flags.
Yes. So even during all of that, I was ambitious. So unlike today, everybody was equal. The doctor lived, the doctor in the neighborhood, lived 4 houses down from us. A little bit nicer, but not a mansion in Chenal. the developer, the real estate developer lived on the same street. The preacher, the Methodist preacher, lived on the same street. Our family lived there. We were all very middle class, and middle class back then was, not frivolous at all. So everybody was very conscientious, and they're all World War II Depression people, so they're very conscientious, and so Mother was going to save money in case something happened and do without so I could have something,
Yeah.
And so I think that really instills in you and in all of her 3 children to work hard so that your mother didn't have to not have a new pair of shoes or not get the new coat she wanted, or something like that. So I think we were all very ambitious from an early age. And so when I wasn't very good in school, which I was not, which is now we know is because everybody's dyslexic. A lot of people are dyslexic and stuff. So when I was not good in school and I went to a VOTEC school, I was wonderful at a VOTEC school.
Yeah.
It moves really slow. You do all the homework in class. You don't go, okay, go home and read that and come back and tell me about it. I can't do that. But I can read it in class, and I can be taught a different way. And so by the time you get through a VOTEC school and you end up being great at it, and then you come back, you're just ambitious. So I will say this, though. When I graduated from that VOTEC school, I thought I was going to go into fashion merchandising because I love clothes. If anybody ever knows me, they know that I am what do they call them, clothes horse?
Mm-hmm.
If I had a vice, which I have vices, but it is probably vanity. I love clothes and makeup and hair and fingernails.
Can
Shoes.
confirm.
Shoes. So I went to school for that because my mother comes in so I tried to go to college, failed at college. Three months in there, working as hard as I could, D's. I was like, I came home with the tail between my legs. One of the most depressing times of my life. Just like they always say, it's in the darkest right before the dawn. My mother comes in because I had 17 magazines, I love clothes, and she comes in and she goes to the back and she says, honey, there's an ad in the back here for Miss Wade's Fashion Merchandising School. And you wear clothes. You wear hats. I have so many pictures.
Who does that?
I mean, right.
Yeah, right.
You wear hats all the time, crazy hats all the time. And she says, why don't you, it's a one-year VOTEC school. Why don't you go there? And I first thought, another school? Oh, my God, really? But they ponied up the money, and they sent me off to this VOTEC school. And first week there, I called my boyfriend back home, and I started crying. I really never had boyfriends at all, but I did happen to have one at this time. And I called him at home, and I said, I can't do this. I'm so homesick. I'm crying. I'm at a phone booth, because that's what you had to do back then. He said, you need to stay. My mother said, you need to stay. I was like, I don't want to stay. It's too hard. I stayed, and at the end of the year, I was one of the best in the class.
Best decision you ever made.
Yes. Hardest and best thing I ever did. It's exactly like your parents keep telling you. It's just really hard. You just have to do it. But then I graduate in 1974. So I graduate high school in 72. I graduate from Miss Wade's VOTEC school in 74. When did we have the gas crisis with Jimmy Carter with the lines around the service stations?
Mid-'70s?
1974. Yeah. I couldn't get a job in my industry because what do you give up? Buying clothes and eating out.
Oh, yeah.
So I couldn't get a job in my industry at all. So I got a job selling flags for a company called Betsy Ross Flag Girls because I had to have a job.
Sure.
I wasn't going to go home. I have never not worked since I was 15. I mean, I worked at Kentucky Fried Chicken. I worked at Park Hill Theater. I mean, you just work. And so so I got this job with Betsy Ross Flag Girls, and I worked there 6 months. And my roommate, she left, and everybody was leaving, and I was left alone. I didn't have any friends left in Dallas, no boyfriend. And my mother, she's smart. She said, I wonder who's selling flags in Little Rock, Arkansas. And I said, I don't know. She said, well, why don't you make some phone calls and find out? So she taught me to use the phone. She said, call the Secretary of State and find out who they buy from. Well, they bought from somebody in California. She said, call these people and ask them. So I called them. They said, well, we buy from somebody in Mississippi. And then she said, and this is funny because I know this woman's grandkids. They live down the street from me. She said, call the only entrepreneur woman that I can think of in North Little Rock, Irma Dumas Dress Shop. It was like the best dress shop in North Little Rock. We could never buy clothes there. We sewed all of our clothes. Back then, a lot of people sewed. We sewed all of our clothes. Mother said, call Irma Dumas and ask her how you start in business. And I can remember to this day standing there calling her, my knees shaking, and I told her who I was. She didn't know who I was. And I said, thinking about starting a flag company, tell me about owning your own business. And I could not tell you what she said to this day, but it was encouraging. and I don't know. Mother said, "Okay, you've done everything right.
You've done your market research.
You've done your market research.
Yeah.
You've showed your willingness to face your fears." She said she'd done the research. She said it takes $50 to start a business, and today it takes $150. People, if you want to start a business, it takes $150. You got to go buy a city permit for $150, and that's it. Back then, it took $50. She said, good. She took me down. We got a city permit. You get a tax ID number. And she said, you pick out a name. And I said, I'm going to be available flag and banner company, because flags were hard to find and not very available. Ooh. And she said, honey, none of my children, my daughter's not going to be available anything. I was just thinking, back then you had to be the A's.
Oh, yeah.
You had to be in numerical or whatever, the alphabetical. So you wanted to be at the top of the A's in the phone book. And she said, how about Arkansas? I said, okay.
That's awesome.
That's so funny.
It would never have occurred to me to protest the available. It just didn't pop into my head, but a mom would.
Oh,
yeah,
yes.
yeah. No.
Yeah. Wow. So the Betsy Ross thing was door to door, and now suddenly you've decided, I want to have an actual business.
I was door to door for 9 years. And when my daughter was born, well, actually for 5 years. When my daughter was born, I moved it into my house, and it was, and we did it telephone sales.
Oh, yeah.
Because they deregulated the telephone system, and Ma Bell was being deregulated, so phones got cheap, and you could put them in your house. And so I bought an 800 number back then, and it called the 7 states around Arkansas. There are 7 states that touch Arkansas. Did y'all know that? 6 states touch Arkansas.
I was going to say, yeah.
There are 6 states. I didn't know that. So when you bought 800 numbers, you bought them in rings, and they got more expensive as they go out.
Oh, okay.
And so I bought the first ring I could afford, and then advertised in the Yellow Pages in all of those places. It was like a huge marketing gamble, like the first one I ever did, and it paid off.
Wow, sure did.
And then came out the Lillian Vernon catalog. Does anybody remember those?
I do remember those.
Well, all of a sudden, Lillian Vernon has changed everything, because data started becoming Axiom and all of that. People started learning about data and the power of data, and mail orders started becoming a big thing. And I kept getting these Lillian Vernon catalogs in the mail, and I said, well, I'm going to start mailing catalogs. So I ended up making a catalog and went from telemarketing to catalog sales. And in 1995, I was at UALR doing one of their business seminars that they do, which I think everybody should do. If you ever get a chance to do anything at their Small Business Development Center, they're just a wealth of information if you're starting off, teach how to read income statements and financial statements and stuff. And I'm at one of those seminars, and I'm sitting at a round table with this girl, and I hear and they're talking about this newfangled thing called the internet. Mm-hmm. It's 1995, and that just happens to be at my round table is Marla Johnson, the head of Aristotle.
Oh, God, perfect.
And I'm like, what the hell are they talking about? And then she said, so I become friends with Marla, and she says, we can't call you Arkansas Flag and Banner. That's too much to type for an URL. An address, an internet
URL,
address. Yeah. So she says, how about flag-banner? So Marla's very first flagandbanner.com was flag-banner.com. And then when I talk on the phone, I'd go flag-banner. Everybody's like, D-A-S-H. I was like, no, that's no good. Yeah. So I called up Marla, and she bought me Flag and Banner, but we probably still have flag-banner.com.
We do. I'm 90% sure, yeah.
And, of course, we bought Arkansas Flag and Banner just for
now you can type it in, and yeah.
But it's too hard to write, and plus nobody knows how to spell it.
No, nobody knows how to spell Arkansas.
No.
Arkansas.
That's almost the way you have to say it, so they know how to spell it.
Exactly.
Yes.
Well, the growth from that pattern that you just described, and then finally the internet, and then finally the realization, my God, I need more space. What's this old building in downtown Little Rock? And next up on the show, the acquisition of Taborian Hall from Kerry McCoy. You're listening to Up in Your Business, and we will be back after a short break. Let's talk about the biggest fundraiser that happens every year for the Dreamland Ballroom upstairs at Taborian Hall, the home of flagandbanner.com.
And the next event has been set Saturday, February 11th. Tickets are already on sale at dreamlandballroom.org. Make sure you buy yours early. Get a table so you're right up front. And if you're interested in sponsoring Dancing into Dreamland, you can contact the director of the event, Matthew McCoy, right there at flagandbanner.com and ask him about sponsorship opportunities. Also, one more thing, volunteers are needed. The Friends of Dreamland need plenty of help setting up and running and even breaking down the event afterwards. Again, Matthew McCoy can help you if you're interested in volunteer opportunities. But for sure, buy some tickets for Dreamland Ballroom's Dancing into Dreamland, February 11th, 2023.
You're back with Up in Your Business with Kerry McCoy, although I'm Tom Wood sitting in as a guest host this week because we're actually interviewing Kerry herself, and we've learned a lot about the early years, a lot about influences, a lot about things that you have incorporated into your business life now, and I want to jump into Taborian Hall. It was not in great shape when you bought it, was it?
No, in fact, my husband was working for Cruz and Associates, and they were on the top of the Union Bank building, very top floor, and they could look down, and they could look right through the roof of my Taborian Hall out their window. And we at the time were in one of our, I think it was Desert Storm. I think we were in Desert Storm. And so there had been some stuff on the TV about they'd bombed the Baghdad Hotel, and all of my husband's Bond Daddy friends up there would say, "Look, your wife just bought the Baghdad Hotel down there," because it was just bombed out looking. But, homeless people had lived in it and had built fires in it, and it had weakened the trusses in the roof, and we'd had a big snow like the year before, and it was heavy on the roof, and it had fallen through. This enormous truss made out of trees that you can't even find anymore, these 12 by 12
logs,
40-foot log, 12 by 12, 40-foot logs that were made up the trusses. It had fallen through 2 floors and pushed out the side of the brick building. But I didn't really see all of that because I'm not an engineer. I mean, I could see I could see what had happened to its damage, but I think if I was older and knew what I know today, I would be intimidated. Mm-hmm. And I think that's true about every single thing I've done in life. And I've known how hard this radio show was, I might not have started it either.
I got it. I understand. Yeah.
If I'd have known how hard Flag and Banner was, I might not have started it either. But you just do things. You're just driven to do things. You just have to listen to life and kind of go where they take you. So, listening to life, I am living in Little Rock. I drive down the 630 freeway every day to go to my office in North Little Rock because Flag and Banner is now in a cottage, an 1890 house in North Little Rock on Main Street. Mm-hmm. Again, that my mother owned and was letting me have rent-free for a few years because the insurance on it was so expensive being vacant. She said, if you'll live in it, I won't have to pay that expensive insurance.
Interesting.
On it. Mm-hmm. And I painted it for her and was a good tenant. So I had moved myself in there because I put my daughter in Little St. Pat's that was right down the street.
Oh, yeah.
And so I could walk down there and pick her up and bring her back home, and it was just everything worked out again, family support. So I'm driving across to North Little Rock every day, and I'm always driving down the 630 freeway, and over to the left, just past the Capitol, is this just stately red brick 3-story building with columns that I just look at every day, and I just think it looks like a big bank, and it just draws me in. And somehow or another, I find out that it's for sale, that it's got liens and back taxes on it, and it's up for sale. And Mark Abernathy, who I interviewed on the show, had bought it for a couple of $1,000s on the courthouse steps for back taxes, or at an auction or something, and then it couldn't figure out what to do with it. Because, what are you going to do with it?
Yeah.
And so I went to him and I said, can I buy it? And he said, yeah. And he charged me $20,000. And I think he only paid $2,000 for it. But most people are like, you bought that building for $20,000? Well, that seemed like a lot. I remember that I went home and told my father-in-law, and he was like, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard anybody go, look at that building. What are you doing? And then I went and told my parents, and they were like, that doesn't seem smart. And I'm sure my mother went and talked to my dad or something because, I just could not leave it alone. And finally, my dad came over one day, and he brings over a $20,000 check, which is unbelievable that my parents had a $20,000 check, but finally, late in life, they started to kind of get some money after the kids were gone. And so they brought over a check for $20,000. And I'll never forget, I came on the back porch. He goes, come out here. And I went out on the back porch of the office, and he said, I got this for you. Here's your money. And he handed me this check, and I looked at it. It was $20,000. And when he handed it to me, he did it like this. He gave it to me from kind of over his shoulder and looked away from me and went, well, I'll never see that again. Stormed off. And I said, Dad, I promise you'll see it again.
He's walking away and you're making promises. Wow.
Yeah. And I didn't think he would, because I think that was summertime, and it went from renovation of being $100,000 to $150,000, and High Worthing Bank was going to loan me the $100,000. When it went to $150,000, they were like, no, ma'am, we're out. It's November. It's right before Thanksgiving, and in Arkansas in November it rains. It's raining in that big hole in that building. I'm not sleeping at night. I'm thinking I'm going to lose Dad's $20,000. What am I going to do? I finally I'm just manic, and I just walk into Twin City Bank. It was called Twin City Bank back then in North Little Rock, and I walk in, and I said, I need to see a loan officer, and she says, all right, there's this guy over here. So I walk in. What was his name? Ed. So I walk in, and he said, Ed's standing there. Ed doesn't talk. He's like a sphinx. He doesn't talk.
No.
Even after I got to know him for 20 years later, he doesn't talk. He's been Ed Owens. He's been there forever. He's like a VP now, you know. But he's just one of those guys that don't talk. So I walk in his room, and I said, "Hello, I'm Kerry, and I bought this building." And he's standing there shaking my hand, and I walk back and forth in front of his desk, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, rant. What I've done,
Ranting and pacing.
Ranting and pacing. What I've done, what I've got to do, what's going to happen. I've got to have this money. Blah 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 blah. Neither one of us ever sit down. He goes, "Okay, I'll call you in a little while. Give me your card." And so I left. The next day, he calls me and says, I'll give you the money. I took it to committee. They had just deregulated banks, and we're going to start letting banks cross over into other cities. Back then, banks couldn't be in other cities to stop what's going on now, conglomerates.
Yes.
So you couldn't, they just deregulated banks, and Twin City Bank in North Little Rock wanted to go into Little Rock, and they wanted to put a sign on the 630 freeway on my building and say, funded by Twin City Bank, and they took a risk with me and let me do it.
Timing was perfect, and you didn't even know it. Mm-hmm. Wow.
So we broke ground Thanksgiving weekend, and I'll never forget this. So you had to pull the old roof off to put the new roof on, and when you pull old roofs off of old buildings, they could fall to the ground. You know, especially if you're missing the third floor like this one was. I have two guys up there. One of them has 4 teenage children, young and teenage children, and he's walking around the edge of that. They're tying they're tying ropes with cranes, 400 feet in the air. And they're walking on the edge of that building, and they're pulling sheets of that roof off on Thanksgiving weekend. And I'm thinking, these guys could die up there.
Mm-hmm. So
what am I doing? Why am I doing this? I'm telling you, I look back, again, naivety. I mean, if I had thought about it, I'd have been like, no, don't go up there, don't do that, that's just dangerous.
Mm-hmm. Right.
If their wives would have seen what they were doing, they'd have been so mad.
Wow.
But they did. They pulled the roof off, we put it on. Remember Crane Construction? Do you remember Crane?
I do remember them, yes.
Yeah. He was the only guy in town that would touch it. He came over and he did it great.
Wow. And so the process of getting that building back into shape, give me a year's...
So the first year we moved we just put a roof on it and put, and got into the first floor only. That was all we could do. We couldn't even have heat. We had space heaters with every week. We had to bring in propane and put it in these space heaters. And we stood around space heaters in the winter, and then the phone would ring. We'd run over and answer the phone, then we'd go back and stand around space heaters. I mean, that's how slow life was before the internet.
Yeah.
I think they just invented fax machines, which we thought was like a revelation.
Right.
It was really, we just stood around and did that. And I always said, for listeners that don't know, on the 3rd floor of the Taborian Hall is the Dreamland Ballroom. And before I bought the building, when I first started becoming obsessed with it, I was pregnant with son Matthew, who is now the executive director of the Friends of Dreamland Ballroom. And I would sneak down there, and I would go in the front door, and I'd yell to see if there were any homeless people in there. Hello. And sometimes there were, and I'd run off. And sometimes there weren't, and I'd sneak through, and it took several visits to make it up to the third floor. I'd look at the first floor, and then I'd say, okay, and then I'd go to the second floor, and you couldn't really walk around up there because the big truss had fallen through. And then I find there were two sets of stairs, and one stair was completely blocked, and then I found another one, and you could kind of crawl under some debris where the roof had fallen in. It made this kind of channel, this little hallway, and I crouched down and I crawled through there. And when I came out and turned around and looked back at the Dreamland Ballroom stage and the whole box seats and everything, I'm telling you, Tom, it was a spiritual experience. The roof was off, the birds were flying around, the sun was shining in. I'm pregnant, nesting like you wouldn't believe, I guess. I don't know.
Right.
And it was just gorgeous. And that's when I became just manic about it. I had to have it. And to this day, people can walk up there, and some people still get that spiritual feeling from it. There was so much going on up there at some time. It really is very exciting. And then I bought it, and we didn't put a fence around it. And some little hooligan got in there one night, tried to tear the whole stage down and all the box seats down. And so then I ended up having to put a trailer down there with a security guard sitting down there while we were under construction. Just a hooligan.
Yep.
Just hooligans.
No reason at all. Just
in there knocking down.
I can completely understand the epiphany you had when you looked around, though, and you saw it, because the history of that place is just one of the really startling stories about downtown Little Rock.
I had no idea. I had no idea why that building spoke to me so much, but it sure did. And after we got in, we're standing around those heaters on the first floor. These old timers would come up, these old black men would come up, and they'd look through the window and put their hands over their eyes, and they'd try to look through the window and look in there. And when I'd see them, I'd run out there onto the front sidewalk and say, hey. And they go, who are you? What'd you do? And I tell them what I did, and they go, oh, I used to, and they'd tell me stories. And I began to learn all about the history. And my favorite old man that used to come down, well, there was two. There was Leon Majors. He just died a couple years ago. And then there was Mac Honeycutt. And Mac Honeycutt had the Honeycutt Hotel, and his brother had the confection, which is what they called bakeries back in the old days, I guess. And Max Honeycutt had a gold M and a gold H on his two front teeth.
Oh, that's right.
I loved it so much. And I said, give me some pictures from when you were back here. And he said, my house burned down. I'm living with my sister. I don't have one picture when I used to be back here. But I did manage to hire a historian, Berna Love, who did end up writing a book about it. And we did end up getting a lot of interviews. And we ended up giving all those interviews and all the history and all the work that we did together to the PBS. And they ended up making a documentary. So we did save a lot of it, but a lot of the old guys had already passed on. It's sad.
There's so much about that place that just makes you realize what a difference our city was in 1945, right after the war, to now, and the way that entire circuit of entertainment, all through the Midwest down to the South, down to New Orleans, we were a huge part of that, and it's Dreamland Ballroom where all those entertainers played.
You're talking about the Chitlin Circus. You're talking about the Chitlin Circus, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really was. And I learned so much about black history. I did not know that I think it was the turn of the century, it was 1890 or 1910, that we had more black senators in Congress than we've ever had.
Mm-hmm. I think 1890.
Did you know that, Tom?
I think I learned that in that PBS documentary.
Yes, and see, people don't realize that Little Rock used to be called the prosperous city, and the blacks used to be called the prosperous people. In the newspaper, the prosperous people. 9th Street was just hugely prosperous.
And completely self-sufficient. Banks, doctors, everything that you needed.
And when you talk to those old timers, they were like, oh, I had a good business till desegregation. It was like Walmart kind of came to town. And every one of their customers started shopping in other stores because they could, and the prices were probably cheaper. Just like we've done in all these small communities. Walmart comes to town, we bankrupt the small 5 and dime stores. It's progress. But they
At the
had
expense of a group of people.
But it just really ended up bankrupting all of 9th Street and there's not only, I think a Dubison Funeral Home is the only black business left from before the 1960s.
Wow. That's the only thing left down there.
I think it's the only. Well, it's not down there. I think it's over on 12th or something. But every black business ended up getting bankrupt. Well, the white people didn't shop in the black businesses, and when the black people left,
Yeah.
Yeah, no market left.
no market left.
Yep. Customer base gone. That's it. Can't do business.
So, I mean, no one could have predicted that, though.
Oh,
You
no.
know, I mean, your heart's in the right place. No one could have predicted that, you know.
Were people who were politicians in the city and so on, was there any, the word thankful is not the right word, but were they appreciative that you had taken on this task?
The mayor was.
Really?
Oh, yeah. He said, this white elephant has been driving me nuts. It needs to be torn down because there's homeless people there, but it's got all this history with it, and I'm getting all this, flack from these history people. He said, I got another building. You want to buy it too? He tried to get me to buy another one.
Oh, yeah. What was it?
It was the Mosaic Templar.
Oh, that's
down the
right.
street.
Wow.
He was like,
Yeah.
could you buy the Mosaic Templar? I said, I've already looked at the Mosaic Templar. I want my building.
Yeah. Just do with that one right there. So
love
now for
mine.
people who've never been there, you've got the retail outlet on the main floor. You've got offices and administration and sales on the second floor, and then Dreamland Ballroom up on top.
I always thought, since I bought it and started all of that around 1990, 91, so I always thought by 2000 we'd have the Dreamland Ballroom up and running. I had no idea that business would change so much from 1990 to 2000. So in 2000, the internet is really starting to finally, it's not completely taken off, but people aren't, but businesses are making money 24/7.
Yes.
Business that can only make money 4 weekends out of the year is not a viable business. And construction materials and people are expensive. So to renovate the Dreamland Ballroom, I would have to have $1 million, and I would never be able to pay the note back with 4 weekends out of the month.
Yep.
So we turned it into a nonprofit called Friends of Dreamland, and we were able to get grants from the National Park Service to make it ADA acceptable. We've now got an elevator. It's only been working about 6 months. We got a handicapped bathroom about 3 months ago. We're slowly getting it to where it can be used and not have to pay this $1 million note payment back. Now, I did have offers to turn it to apartments,
Oh, wow.
to turn to restaurants. And if I really was this good businesswoman that everybody says I am, I would have done that. But I just could not do it. I just could not do it.
That's to our benefit, I think, as a city.
In the long run,
Yeah.
yes, but probably not to my bank account. I mean, it's like a hole. What's that song where there's a hole in Daddy's arm where all the money goes? There's a hole in my building where all my money goes.
Well, in thinking of that, what in the world inspires you or makes you confident about buying more businesses? All of a sudden, in the last couple of 3 years, our corner market is part of the Flag and Banner family. Then another satellite location in Miami, Florida. This is some very strong action.
Smart action.
Smart and strong action.
So what? We went from door-to-door sales till
Yeah.
gas prices got too high. Then they deregulated the telephone, so we went to telephone marketing. Then they began to use data in a clever way. We went to catalog sales. Then I hear about the internet at UALR. We're like, we got to get on that gravy train.
Yep.
Which almost bankrupted me because nobody was ready to put their credit cards in there as early as I wanted them to start. It really wasn't until the 9/11 that everybody got real patriotic and didn't care if they put a credit card online. So for 5 years, I was losing money on the internet. And at one time, I have almost bankrupted Flag and Banner a couple of times. At one time, I was spending so much money on internet. I probably did 5 website revisions from 1995 to 2000 because it was the bleeding edge of technology,
Yeah.
and nobody was really ready to use it. But when 9/11 happened, I started selling more flags on the internet. People suddenly got over their fear of putting their credit card on, and it's been going great ever since. So then, Google starts, and I start with Google. I was such an early customer with them. They used to send me Christmas presents. I have a Google,
my God.
I have a Google beach towel. I have a
mini
Google
fridge.
refrigerator. They
It's
used
a
to-
Google-branded mini fridge that lives in the hallway at Flag and Banner.
Wow.
Doesn't work worth crap.
No, but it's adorable. It's like
I had
yeah.
I have a beach towel. I have all this Google stuff. Well, they don't have to do that anymore.
Yeah,
So,
They're not asking for business.
we've been on Google forever, and Google has gotten so mammoth. We spend so much money on Google advertising. If I told you what it is, you would throw up. But you have to. They've got you over a barrel. You got to. Do or die. It's one or the other, So we do that. And every time we go to our marketing meeting, which, by the way, we have a marketing meeting every week, which is really just a game show almost. We can't get done. We just tell jokes and stuff.
I've been in a couple.
Can confirm.
Have you been in some of them?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, God. Well, they're not any better, Tom. So
Just more people, more fun.
More people, more fun. And now we got a new guy, TJ.
Yeah.
And
We're all looking
Dylan.
out
And
the
Dylan.
window.
They're over there videoing.
That's right. Just got a thumbs up.
Yeah. All right. So we're in there, and we're like, what's the next silver bullet? We can't seem to figure out what the silver bullet is. Arkansas Flag and Banner grows 10% every year.
Wow.
That ain't 10% of $4 million is $400,000. I'll be dead before I hit 10 million in sales. I was like, that sounds great, but you're $100,000. It's like talking about Fayetteville. Fayetteville grows so much every year. Well, they've only got 200 people up there. Fayetteville grew about 4. There's just, I don't care how fast Fayetteville grows, it's never going to be big.
I got you.
Unless Walmart just makes them go in there and build a city and makes all their employees move
Which
there.
they're doing.
Which just happened.
Yes.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Unless it's Walmart world, Wally World up there. But anyway, you just got to find something else to do, and it drives me crazy. And so when COVID happened, all these little mom and pops who never made these big internet commitments like me, that work out of their home like I used to, and that have made a fine little living, but they can't sell their business because the business is just them.
Yes, I see.
And so I thought, well, we'll try and buy a couple of them. So we have to date, since COVID, bought 3. No, wait, how many? 3.
Flag companies?
We bought 2 flag companies and then another
And then
plat
Corner
company,
Market.
our corner market.
Mm-hmm.
So we've bought 3, and on all different prices and all different kinds. We're kind of learning about acquisition and how to do it. And that is a great way to grow your business exponentially in 1 year.
It's the answer to that problem you thought you had of only 10% growth. Now suddenly you've got all these other avenues.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Okay. I wondered to myself where the confidence came to do that.
Well, we didn't have it. We almost talked ourselves out of it. How many times, Son Gray?
Many.
But you know me, I'm listening. Gotta go.
Gotta get it done.
Well, and
Get
it's
it done.
interesting because she talks about this like incremental growth, and you can do that, but I mean, how do you take up market share? You push out your competitors or you acquire them.
Mm-hmm.
And in the flag industry, that's just what the flag industry is tiny mom and pops everywhere.
Yeah.
And I think just like so many industries, they're aging out, and I think acquisition seems like the more timely method. So
Well, with the young half of the family working in flagandbanner.com, you've got a long future ahead of you to continue to do this.
Yes, I would not be doing this if I didn't have 3 of my 4 children working in the flag business,
Right.
who are owners and who are doing a great job and who give confidence to everybody that works down there. Because if my husband and I are, 60 years old, and if they're like, well, I should get off this going down ship if they're going to retire, what's going to happen to me? But now they don't have to worry about that. They've got a whole nother generation of people that are doing a good job of running the company.
Well, we're running out of time, and I wanted
right.
to spend just a couple of minutes talking to you about how you do this show week to week and how impressive your research is and how you've improved as an interviewer and how your natural curiosity is just so inspiring when I listen to these shows. Because honest to God, as an editor of a program, I hear every word of every show. And,
I'm sorry.
Oh, no, not at all. I mean, I can't tell you the last time I've edited a show, because I do a lot of the work at home, that I haven't stopped along the way and said, Wendy, you know what I just learned?
That's the same way I feel when I'm learning about my guests.
Yes.
I have to go
Oh,
and
yeah.
do 2 or 3 days worth of work, and then I come in and I bore the marketing department. I go, do you know that the sky, you know.
No, yeah, it's
I feel like I'm in college.
Well,
or we're just having like a guest lecture series every other week, you know.
It's fantastic.
It is.
I've learned so many things just editing this program every week.
Well, thanks, Tom. That's kind of a goal.
You're accomplishing that goal. You really are.
That's good.
And I think one of the best qualities you have as an interviewer is the vulnerability of not being afraid to say, I don't know what that is. Tell me what that is. When they say something that doesn't register, surprises you. Because I guarantee you 50% of your listeners are saying the same thing. I don't know what that is. And then you ask the question, and it's the perfect wrap-up.
You know, nobody wants to be around a know-it-all.
Well, that's a good way to approach it.
Well, and I've always said, everybody around me, I am not particularly smart. I am just ambitious. Gray over here is crazy smart. Look at the size of his brain. Look at his head.
Excuse me.
He's got a big head and a big brain. He's always been smart. He can absorb and retain. I can ask him stuff, and you can tell when he talks he's smart. I am not particularly smart, but I am ambitious.
Well, and you're a pleasure to listen to every week on this show, too.
Thank you, Tom.
You
I
really
enjoy
are.
you. You do a great job of editing. I wish
true.
people could hear how bad I really am.
The stuttering and things we do every week.
I hope you enjoyed this experience.
Who doesn't love talking about themselves?
Well, there you go. That's what I figured we were in for. All right. Love it. Thanks for being here to do this.
Thank you, Tom, for being game for everything I bring up.
Absolutely. It's fun. I enjoy doing it. In closing, everybody, of the Up in Your Business with Kerry McCoy show, always Kerry wants to spend time with you. She always hopes that you learn something. She always hopes that you're enlightened by it and that it inspires your business, your independence, and your life. Kerry McCoy will be back again next week as the host of the program. It's Up in Your Business with Kerry McCoy. Until next week, you want to say how you end the show?
Be brave and keep it up.
That's perfect. Thanks.
If you liked this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel by clicking on the picture of Kerry's face in the center of the screen. For more of Kerry's interviews, click either video on the right of the screen. And as always, thank you for watching.